The doll collector's house. The house on Willow Lane was a brooding presence in our town, a relic of a bygone era that seemed perpetually shrouded in shadow. It had been the subject of whispers and superstitions for as long as I could remember, earning its ominous nickname, the doll collector's house. Children dared each other to approach its wrought iron gates, daring but never lingering, driven back by the tales of its infamous occupant. Madame Isabella, the reclusive owner, had passed away a decade ago, but her legend lived on. Known as a masterful doll maker, she had filled her house with her creations, eerily lifelike dolls that seemed to harbor secrets in their painted eyes. Rumor had it that the dolls contained the souls of children who had mysteriously vanished from the neighborhood over the years. While I was never one for superstition, the stories lingered in the back of my mind, creating an unsettling curiosity. My friends, Danny, Alex, Julie, and I, were drawn by the allure of adventure. We were determined to uncover the truth about the doll collector's house, convinced it was nothing more than an abandoned relic. On a dare, we decided to explore the house, hoping to debunk the rumors and emerge with stories of our own. As night descended, we approached the house under the cover of darkness. The wind howled through the trees, adding to the eerie atmosphere that seemed to cloak the house in a living shroud. The front gate creaked ominously as we pushed it open, hesitating at the threshold before stepping inside. The house's interior was a snapshot of decay. Dusty furniture covered in sheets, the air thick with the scent of mildew. A grand staircase spiraled upwards, inviting us to explore its secrets. To our left, a hallway stretched into darkness, while to our right lay the parlor, where porcelain dolls sat like sentinels watching over their domain. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The others nodded, their bravado tinged with uncertainty. Danny, ever the fearless leader, led the way into the parlor. Our flashlights swept across the room, revealing rows of dolls with unnervingly lifelike features. Each one seemed unique, crafted with painstaking detail, their eyes gleaming with an unsettling light that seemed to follow us. "Creepy," Danny muttered, his flashlight illuminating a doll seated at a small table, its hands positioned as if holding an invisible teacup. "Look at this one." As we examined the dolls, a noise echoed from the hallway, a soft thud followed by a low, whispering voice that seemed to drift through the walls. "Did you hear that?" Danny asked, his bravado faltering. I nodded, feeling my heart race. The whispers grew louder, merging into a haunting melody that filled the house. It was as if the very walls were alive, speaking to us in a language we couldn't understand. "We should find the others," I suggested, my voice trembling. We hurried toward the staircase, the whispers echoing through the empty halls. As we ascended, the air grew colder, and my flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. At the top of the stairs, we found Alex and Julie standing in front of a large room, their faces pale with fear. "What's wrong?" I asked, joining them. "See for yourself," Alex replied, pointing into the room. I stepped forward, my flashlight revealing the chamber's contents. It was a workshop filled with half-finished dolls and tools of the trade. But what caught my attention were the photographs lining the walls, each one depicting a child from the neighborhood who had gone missing. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized some of the faces. These were the lost children, the ones who had vanished without a trace over the years. "What does it mean?" Julie asked, her voice shaking. Before I could respond, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. The room seemed to close in around us, and the air turned frigid. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. Panic set in as the dolls began to move, their limbs creaking as they turned their heads toward us. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, and the whispering became a sinister lullaby that filled the room. "Run!" Danny shouted, grabbing my arm. We bolted from the workshop, the doll's eyes following us with malevolent intent. The house seemed alive, its corridors twisting and turning, leading us deeper into its labyrinthine depths. As we fled, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. Shadows danced along the walls, and the air was thick with the presence of unseen watchers. The whispers taunted us, urging us to join them, to become part of the doll collector's collection. We stumbled down the stairs, our hearts pounding in our chests. The front door loomed ahead, a beacon of escape, but as we reached it, the door slammed shut with a force that shook the house. Trapped and terrified, we turned to face our pursuers. The dolls stood at the top of the staircase, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. They descended slowly, their movements deliberate and menacing. I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder, and I spun around to find myself face to face with one of the dolls. Its expression was serene, but its eyes burned with an inner fire. The last thing I heard before the darkness claimed me was the sound of the doll's laughter, a chilling, mocking echo that promised there would be no escape. Darkness swallowed me whole, the world spinning into a void of silence and shadow. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on the cold wooden floor of the doll collector's house, the faint sound of whispering echoing through the air like a distant memory. The smell of dust and decay was thick in my nostrils as I slowly sat up, trying to make sense of my surroundings. "Danny, Alex, Julie." I called out, my voice barely more than a croak. The only response was the oppressive silence of the house. I fumbled for my flashlight, relief washing over me as it flickered to life. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the same parlor where Danny and I had first encountered the dolls. But now the room felt different, more sinister, as if the walls were closing in. The dolls were still there, seated at their little tea party, but they were no longer frozen in place. Their heads had turned, their glass eyes fixated on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stand. I had to find the others and get out of this nightmare. The whispering grew louder as I stepped into the hallway, a haunting melody that seemed to seep from the very walls. I followed the sound, my footsteps echoing through the house like a heartbeat, quickening with every step. As I moved through the corridors, the temperature dropped, and I shivered, feeling as if 1,000 invisible eyes were watching my every move. The house was a maze, its layout shifting and twisting, leading me further into its depths. "Hello," I called again, the sound barely reaching beyond the shadows. "Is anyone there?" A soft giggle echoed from behind me, and I spun around, my flashlight beam dancing across the walls. But there was nothing, just the oppressive darkness and the whispering that seemed to grow louder, more insistent. I stumbled into what appeared to be a bedroom, the walls lined with shelves of dolls. These were different from the others, more sinister, with twisted features and eyes that seemed to glint with malice. In the center of the room was a bed, its canopy draped with cobwebs, and there, sitting cross-legged on the mattress, was a figure that made my heart stop. It was a doll, larger than the rest, its face disturbingly lifelike. It wore a faded dress, its hair a tangled mess of yarn, and its eyes were wide, staring directly at me. The doll's mouth was twisted into a grin, a grotesque parody of a child's smile. I stepped back, the floor creaking beneath my weight. The whispering crescendoed, a chorus of voices that filled my head with a cacophony of sound. Then the doll spoke, its voice a chilling echo that reverberated through the room. "Stay with us, forever." A cold shiver ran down my spine, and I backed away, my flashlight flickering. Panic surged through me as the doll's eyes seemed to follow my every move, its grin widening as if it knew a secret I didn't. I bolted from the room, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I ran down the hallway. The house seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the walls twisting and warping, leading me deeper into its labyrinthine depths. I stumbled upon a staircase leading downward, the steps vanishing into darkness. With no other option, I descended, the wood groaning beneath my feet. The basement was a vast open space, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and mold. My flashlight revealed rows upon rows of shelves, each lined with dolls in various states of completion. Some were mere heads with unseeing eyes, others were fully formed, their expressions frozen in grotesque caricatures. In the center of the basement stood a workbench, cluttered with tools and unfinished dolls. Behind it, a wall was covered in photographs, the missing children, their faces smiling innocently at the camera. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the implications. The whispers grew louder, the voices merging into a singular chant that filled the room. "Join us, join us." Desperation clawed at me, and I searched for a way out. My flashlight swept across the room, landing on a door partially hidden behind a stack of crates. I raced toward it, throwing it open only to find a narrow passageway that seemed to stretch on endlessly. I hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the basement. The dolls seemed to watch me with malicious glee, their eyes glinting in the darkness. With no other choice, I plunged into the passage, the walls closing in around me. The air was thick and suffocating, and the whispers seemed to follow, urging me deeper into the heart of the house. The passage twisted and turned, leading me to another staircase. I climbed it, my legs burning with exhaustion, and emerged into a dimly lit room. It was a nursery, the walls painted with faded murals of cheerful scenes. But the room was far from welcoming. Dolls sat in rocking chairs, cradles, and toy chests, their expressions vacant and unsettling. At the center of the nursery stood a rocking horse, its eyes staring blankly ahead. I approached it cautiously, feeling a sense of unease settle over me. As I neared the horse, a sudden crash echoed through the room, and the door slammed shut behind me. The dolls turned their heads in unison, their eyes fixing on me with a predatory intensity. The whispers rose to a deafening crescendo, and the room seemed to spin around me. I stumbled backward, my flashlight flickering wildly as I tried to make sense of the chaos. And then, through the din of the whispers, I heard a voice, faint but unmistakable. "Help us." The voice was familiar, and I realized with a jolt that it was Alex. He sounded terrified, trapped somewhere in the depths of the house. I steeled myself, determined to find my friends and escape this nightmare. But as I turned to leave, the rocking horse began to move on its own, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. The whispers morphed into a sinister lullaby, a chilling melody that filled the nursery with an overwhelming sense of dread. The dolls began to move, their limbs creaking as they rose from their seats, advancing toward me with relentless determination. I backed away, the walls closing in, the air thick with terror. The rocking horse continued its ghostly motion, its eyes watching me with a malevolent gaze. Trapped and terrified, I searched for an escape, but the nursery offered none. The dolls closed in, their eyes gleaming with a sinister light, and the whispers reached a fever pitch, echoing through my mind. In that moment, I realized the true horror of the doll collector's house. The dolls were not mere ornaments, they were vessels, prisons for the lost souls of the children who had vanished over the years, and now they wanted me to join them. As the dolls advanced, I braced myself for the inevitable, the chilling thought echoing through my mind. The doll collector's house was not just a home, it was a trap, a nightmare from which there was no escape. But even as the darkness closed in, I held on to a glimmer of hope. My friends were still out there, somewhere in the depths of this accursed place, and I would not rest until I found them. The nursery's walls seemed to pulse with malevolence, the air thick with a chilling sense of despair. The dolls moved closer, their limbs creaking as they advanced, and I felt the full weight of the doll collector's house pressing down on me. Every fiber of my being screamed to flee, but the door was sealed shut, trapping me in this nightmare. "Stay with us," the whispering voices taunted, echoing through my mind. Desperation clawed at me as I searched for any means of escape. My flashlight flickered weakly, casting long, sinister shadows that danced along the walls. I backed away from the advancing dolls, my heart pounding in my chest. "Help us, please." Alex's voice cut through the oppressive noise, a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. Determined to find my friends and escape this horror, I turned my attention to the rocking horse at the center of the room. It continued its ghostly motion, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. I moved toward it, driven by a gut instinct that the horse held some kind of secret. As I approached, the whispers intensified, merging into a cacophony of voices that threatened to drown out my thoughts. Reaching out with trembling hands, I touched the rocking horse's head. The room seemed to tilt and sway, the air crackling with a palpable energy. The horse's eyes flared brightly, and the whispers coalesced into a single piercing scream. Suddenly the room shifted, the walls warping and bending. I stumbled backward, my vision blurring as the world around me twisted into a nightmarish kaleidoscope. The nursery dissolved into shadow, replaced by a long, dimly lit hallway. I was no longer alone. Figures emerged from the darkness, their forms twisted and grotesque. The dolls had transformed, their porcelain faces stretched into hideous masks of rage and despair. They reached for me with claw-like hands, their whispers a relentless chant that echoed through the hall. "Join us, forever." I ran, the hallway stretching endlessly before me. The dolls pursued with a relentless determination, their eyes gleaming with a sinister hunger. My heart hammered in my chest, and the world seemed to close in around me, the walls pressing ever closer. In the distance I saw a door, its frame bathed in an otherworldly light. It was a glimmer of hope in the darkness, a possible escape from this nightmare. I sprinted toward it, my breath ragged and uneven. Just as I reached the door, it swung open, revealing a vast chamber filled with a sea of dolls. They lined the walls, sat upon shelves, and covered the floor, their eyes fixed upon me with a malevolent gaze. At the center of the room stood a massive figure, a doll unlike any I had seen before. It towered over the others, its features twisted and grotesque. Its eyes burned with an unholy light, and its mouth twisted into a cruel smile. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, a chorus of voices that filled the chamber with a deafening roar. The giant doll moved toward me, its limbs creaking as it advanced, and I realized with growing horror that it was Madame Isabella, or what she had become. "You will be part of my collection," she intoned, her voice echoing through the chamber. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. The room was a prison, a place where lost souls were trapped for eternity. I had to find a way to break the curse, to free myself and the others from this nightmare. In that moment, I remembered the photographs in the basement, the missing children whose souls were bound to the dolls. They were the key, the link between this world and the next. With renewed determination, I searched the room for anything that might help. My gaze landed on a dusty, forgotten shelf filled with old, tattered books. I grabbed one at random, flipping through its pages in a desperate bid for answers. The book was filled with strange symbols and incantations, a guide to the dark arts that had ensnared the children's souls. Among the pages, I found a passage that spoke of a ritual to break the curse, to release the spirits from their porcelain prisons. It was a long shot, but it was the only hope I had. I began to chant the words aloud, my voice trembling with fear and determination. The air crackled with energy, the whispers rising to a crescendo as the dolls seemed to hesitate, their movements slowing. Madame Isabella's form loomed over me, her eyes blazing with fury. She reached out with clawed hands, but I continued the incantation, the words flowing from my lips in a desperate plea for salvation. The room seemed to shudder, the walls trembling as the energy reached a fever pitch. The dolls froze, their eyes flickering with uncertainty. Madame Isabella let out a scream of rage, a sound that echoed through the chamber with a bone-chilling intensity. And then, with a final defiant shout, I completed the incantation. The air exploded with light, a brilliant blinding flash that seared through the darkness and tore the shadows asunder. The dolls screamed, their voices merging into a single deafening wail. The light intensified, and I felt a wave of energy ripple through the room, shattering the bonds that held the lost souls captive. As the light faded, the dolls crumbled to dust, their forms dissolving into nothingness. The whispers ceased, replaced by a profound silence that echoed through the chamber. I stood there, trembling and breathless, as the room slowly returned to its former state. The dolls were gone, their souls freed from the curse that had bound them for so long. The door behind me creaked open, revealing my friends, Danny, Alex, and Julie, standing in the hallway, their faces pale and eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, rushing to my side. I nodded, relief washing over me. "I think so. I broke the curse." The house seemed to sigh, its oppressive weight lifting as the darkness receded. We stumbled out of the chamber, our steps unsteady as we made our way back through the twisting corridors. As we reached the front door, I paused, glancing back at the house. It seemed different now, its sinister aura dissipated, its secrets laid bare. The doll collector's house was no longer a prison, but a relic of a dark past that would haunt the town for years to come. We stepped outside, the cool night air a welcome relief after the stifling confines of the house. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale light over the street as we made our way back to safety. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered in the shadows, watching us with an unyielding gaze. The doll collector's house had been a place of nightmares, a realm of terror that had claimed countless souls. But now it was just a house, a place of memories and echoes where the whispers of the past would remain forever silent. Or so I thought. The sun was setting as we walked away from the doll collector's house, for what we hoped was the last time. The ordeal had been harrowing, but we had triumphed. The darkness that had haunted the house for decades had been vanquished, and the souls of the lost children were finally free. But even as we left, a sense of unease lingered at the back of my mind, as if we had missed something crucial. So what's the dream? That night I lay awake in bed, unable to shake the feeling that our task was not yet complete. Exhaustion eventually pulled me into a fitful sleep, where dreams of the house plagued my mind. In the dream, I found myself standing in the basement again, surrounded by dolls. They watched me with unblinking eyes, their expressions shifting from anger to sadness. A voice echoed in the darkness, a voice that was not part of the whispers, but something deeper, more knowing. "You freed them, but you did not free me." The dream shifted, and I saw the house as it once was, vibrant and alive. Children played in the yard, laughter echoing through the halls. But at the heart of it all was Madame Isabella, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. "I only wanted to protect them," she whispered, her voice laced with regret. But I failed. The dream dissolved into darkness, and I awoke with a start, the remnants of her words echoing in my mind. I knew what I had to do. The house had one more secret left to reveal, and I was determined to uncover it. The final revelation. The following morning, I gathered my friends and explained the dream. They listened intently, their faces a mix of disbelief and concern. Despite our reservations, we knew we had to return one final time. As we approached the house, a sense of calm settled over us. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by a quiet serenity. The house seemed to welcome us back, its secrets ready to be unveiled. We entered cautiously, the familiar creaks and groans of the floorboards echoing through the halls. Our footsteps led us to the basement, where the shattered remains of the altar lay scattered across the floor. "This is where it all happened," Alex said, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, stepping closer to the altar. As I did, a faint glow emanated from the ground, a hidden compartment beneath the rubble. We cleared the debris, revealing a small, intricately carved box. The wood was smooth and polished, etched with the same symbols we had seen throughout the house. "This must be it," Danny said, awe in his voice. I opened the box with trembling hands, revealing its contents. A collection of old letters, photographs, and a small ornate key. The letters were written in Madame Isabella's handwriting, filled with pleas and apologies. "To my beloved children," one letter began. "I sought to protect you from the darkness, but in my desperation, I became its servant. Forgive me." The photographs depicted smiling children, each one lovingly labeled with a name and date. These were the missing children, their souls now free thanks to our efforts. But it was the key that intrigued us most. It was small and delicate, its surface etched with intricate patterns. As I held it, a sense of familiarity washed over me. "What does it unlock?" Julie asked, peering over my shoulder. I turned the key over in my hands, trying to discern its purpose. And then it struck me. The attic. We had explored every corner of the house except for the attic. With renewed determination, we climbed the staircase to the top floor. The attic door was locked, its surface covered in dust and cobwebs. I inserted the key, and with a satisfying click, the door swung open. Harrowing, the attic. The attic was bathed in a warm golden light that filtered through a small window. It was filled with an array of dolls, each one meticulously crafted and arranged with care. Unlike the dolls we had encountered before, these were different, peaceful, almost serene. In the center of the room stood a small pedestal, upon which rested a single doll. It was larger than the others, its features more refined and lifelike. Its eyes were closed, its expression one of tranquility. Madame Isabella's presence filled the room, a gentle warmth that enveloped us. Her voice echoed softly, no longer the sinister whisper we had feared. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You have freed them, and in doing so, freed me." The doll on the pedestal stirred, its eyes fluttering open. A soft light radiated from within, illuminating the attic with a comforting glow. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. This doll was not a vessel of darkness, but of hope, a beacon for the lost souls to find their way home. As we watched, the doll's light grew brighter, its warmth filling the attic and spilling out into the house. The shadows that had plagued the house for so long dissolved, leaving only light and peace. The final goodbye. We stood in silence, awed by the transformation. The house was no longer a place of fear and despair, but of healing and closure. As we prepared to leave, I felt a sense of completion, knowing that we had not only broken the curse, but restored the house to its former glory. Madame Isabella's spirit lingered for a moment longer, a final farewell before she too found her peace. We stepped outside, the sun shining brightly on the doll collector's house. It stood as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of redemption. The neighborhood children would no longer speak of it in hushed tones, nor would they dare each other to approach its doors. Instead, the house would stand as a reminder of the past and a symbol of hope for the future. As we walked away, I felt a profound sense of relief. We had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, our bonds strengthened by the ordeal. The doll collector's house would forever be a part of our history, but its mysteries had finally been laid to rest. And as we left, the sound of children's laughter echoed faintly in the breeze, a final gift from the souls we had freed, and a reminder that even in the darkest of places, light can always find a way in. The end.